Can you hear us? Okay, I'm sorry. We have the Brazoria County Sheriff on the phone. Sheriff, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
What's the situation out there?
So currently what we have now is, I'm sure that it's been recorded that there's been a chlorine release, an accidental chlorine release from the Olin plant down in Freeport. There were some shelters in place from the city of Lake Jackson and the city of Clute. Those have just recently been lifted.
Oh,
That is
okay.
great.
Wow.
That is
Great.
That's good
Yeah.
news.
Yes, that's great news. They have been lifted.
That's for Lake Jackson
and-
and Clute, correct?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, so Freeport still has a shelter in place?
Not to my knowledge.
So shelter in
I
place
believe-
is over for everyone in that area.
Yes, that's the information that I've received. That's correct.
Does that include the schools as well?
Brazoria ISD and the college, have those shelter in places been lifted too, Sheriff?
Yes, I believe all the shelters that
Okay.
were initially in place have now been lifted.
Sheriff, can you tell us what is conducted, what kind of protocol that you go through with other city officials and maybe folks at the plant as to how you test the air quality to know when to lift the shelter in place?
Yes, so that is something that is conducted by the refinery or Olin itself to make that call. We certainly defer those things to them. They're the professionals on that. Our job is obviously, top priority for the law enforcement is, public safety, and that is our key goal. We do work closely, and we have a close partnership with all the refineries in the area, including Olin and Dow.
Well, Sheriff, based off of when the leak was first reported and when it was contained, would you say this was a quick response compared to previous leaks? Can you share some insight on that?
Certainly, from the information that I've received from the timeline that I have, is that yes, it was certainly a quick response. There was quick notifications by all parties involved, and as mentioned before, I feel like that we have a very close relationship, and we're part of our the actual sheriff's office is working very closely with Olin and their security team as well as their responders.
Sheriff Stallman, do you know anything about injuries? Any injuries?
So at this time, there's none reported. Obviously, this is going to be thoroughly investigated and thoroughly looked at. We are obviously encouraging anyone, if they have any kind of symptoms that may be from this. I will say that there is no reported off-site release or any off-site complaints at this time.
Okay.
From every information that I've been able to obtain.
So,
Sheriff,
yeah,
can
so
you
there could be injuries on the facility. We just don't know.
It's not been released.
That's right. Nothing to my knowledge at this time, but that's still, certainly being assessed
Okay.
and looked into.
Sheriff, can you tell us or speak to at all at this point about any possible environmental impacts?
No, I can't speak on that. As I said before, it looks like this whole release has been contained to just on-site, and what impact is there, I'm unaware of.
Just to be clear, now that the shelter in place have been cleared, if you will, people can put their AC units and all of that on. So that's good news for them, correct, Sheriff?
That's correct. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so what's next for you in the Sheriff's Department as per this leak?
Well, again, is just to assess the situation, make sure that that everything is contained and everything is being thoroughly investigated, to the fullest, and to assist Olin and Dow operations as much as we possibly can.
Okay, Sheriff Stallman, thank you so much for providing that update for us. Very important update. All the shelter in places have been lifted and the air is safe to breathe. We appreciate your time.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Great news, though. The
Very
shelter in
good.
place.
Great
The
news.
Very
shelter in
good.
place is over for the people in Clute and Lake Jackson, and the sheriff says, as far as he's concerned, nobody has been injured, at least off-site. Knows of no injuries, and that is fabulous news.
That's fabulous news. But of course, Dr. Johnny mentioned if you feel symptoms later, right, like coughing, breathing hard, that's something you want to get checked right away.
Yeah, and if anybody is having any of those symptoms, now might be the time for them to get to the hospital.
Check that out.
But hopefully none of that has happened.
Yeah.
Yes, hopefully. Well, we do have a few crews heading to the scene. We have our Troy Kless heading to Lake Jackson and Jason Miles heading to the plant. Even though the shelter in place has been lifted, there's still information to get out there. How did the leak happen? What's going on there on site? So he's working to get some information, whatever he can, talk to officials there, if anyone will talk with us.
Yeah, and even talking to residents, right? Hearing from them about what they did in the meantime. What next? Are they feeling any symptoms? Are they okay? Lots of questions to find out there on the ground.
Yeah, as we take another live look at the medical center and Memorial Hermann Hospital and the chopper that has just landed, hopefully nobody was transported to the hospital from this accident in Freeport today. Okay, let's give you some more information on chlorine exposure. Since you might still have a lot of questions about that. Especially chlorine gas can cause a range of health effects depending on the concentration and duration of exposure. Symptoms can range from mild irritation of the eyes, nose, and throat to severe respiratory distress and lung damage. It can be bad for you.
Yes, so that's particularly the case for folks with pre-existing upper respiratory issues, like if you're a smoker or if you have emphysema. So please read those symptoms and definitely call your doctor or go to the ER if you're experiencing anything like that.
Yeah, we've got Jason Miles here who just got to the scene right now. We're going to pull him up. He's arriving to the scene. Jason Miles just arrived there. Jason, you're on the phone with us now. What can you tell us? What are you seeing? I know they mentioned the shelter in places have been lifted, but what does the actual scene look like? Are emergency responders still there?
Yeah, I think that's the most important note at this point, that the shelters in place have been lifted. Keep in mind, they were all precautionary out of an abundance of caution. That's what happens down here when you have so many refineries, so many chemical manufacturers, so many plants that pose potential hazards. We just got into Freeport, and we see the Olin complex. Dow Chemical is also here, has a huge presence, Air Liquide as well. And when you go along 332, say you're going to Surfside Beach, you pass all of these different industrial sites. So it's a little bit confusing pinpointing exactly where this happened. We are currently still looking for Olin Plant B, Olin being a major chemical manufacturer. They also manufacture ammunition, I do believe. But we stopped at, wouldn't you know it, a Buc-ee's that is very prominent there if you've ever been to Surfside Beach. And several employees from the Olin plant were there gathered in the parking lot, somewhat concerned, but not really. They say this is part of the business, these kinds of incidents. Thankfully, according to them, they had not heard of any injuries or any significant issues as a result of the chlorine release this morning. We did see a couple of emergency personnel there kind of posting up at the Buc-ee's as well. Again, according to the sheriff, you probably reported this already, the Brazoria County Sheriff telling us that shelters in place have been lifted in the areas of Freeport, Lake Jackson, and Clute, all of the adjacent municipalities to this chemical industrial facility that we're talking about here this morning.
Jason, we're looking at some photos right now that we understand you got. Can you speak more about what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, that was a gentleman who posted on various social media platforms photos, I guess, in the immediate aftermath of the leak. You can see that kind of yellowish haze, and I've covered similar leaks in the past where you have this kind of cloud that emanates from wherever a release is happening. Obviously a little concerning when you look at those photos. He says he worked inside the Olin facility where this happened and was concerned at first. You may be able to read some of his captioning on what was initially a Snapchat post, I believe, alerting folks to what's going on, and his photos have since kind of taken off on social media. Many people sharing them in this area, as they have also gotten alerts on their phones because they're signed up with the local emergency management association or organization that sends out alerts in these types of situations.
Yeah.
But he's still at work, he says, still there at the facility, kind of staying put at the moment, he says, as he has been ordered to do along with other employees, I presume.
And it's a good sign that obviously it's deemed safe for him to stay there. So, Jason, you've covered a few of these leaks and no explosion today, but when you go into an area that's been a shelter in place, and even though the shelter in place has been lifted, it's a weird scene out there. Well, can you describe it?
Yeah, honestly, Ron, it seems like it's business as usual for most folks. Traffic's still moving, people going in and out of stores, and I hate to say that, people in communities like this where you have this heavy chemical, industrial, complex type of atmosphere. We see it also in like Pasadena, Deer Park, those areas. It's just kind of part of life. Obviously, they take it seriously, and I hope people have, heeded precautions and advice from authorities. Certainly the school districts have. They shut down schools and that kind of thing, went into their normal shelter-in-place procedures. But for the most part, having been to Freeport on days when things like this are not happening, it doesn't seem a bit out of the ordinary from what I'm seeing. But again, keep in mind the shelter-in-place has been lifted.
So Jason, what's the next thing you're trying to find out? I would imagine what caused this, right? And of course the level 3 leak, what that all means.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. Hopefully authorities will clue us in on exactly what happened out here and how they managed to, stop the release pretty quickly, according to the post I saw on the emergency account of the agency that kind of oversees this kind of thing down here. But obviously the company itself will be looking at this, as they always do, after incidents to see what best practices were in place and if anything needs to be improved.
Jason, so just confirming here, based on what you're seeing, there doesn't appear to be any sort of panic or any running or any extra emergency vehicles at the plant, correct?
No, and honestly, I haven't gotten my eyes exactly on the location of where this happened, but no, we have not seen any frantic activity so far.
Okay,
but again, since the shelter in place has been lifted, maybe that's dissipated at this point.
Well, that's a good sign. We'll take it as a good sign, of course. Jason, have you been made aware of any news conferences that the company or any of the officials out there plan to have?
I have not, and I reached out independently to the company itself, which is based in Missouri, I believe, Olin Corporation, and I have not heard back yet, but I assume we'll get some kind of statement or some response to what happened here at some point today.
How far are you from the actual plant where this leak happened, Jason?
I'm not sure. If you're familiar with this area, there are tons of plants. And from what employees told me, it's kind of back beyond another plant we were looking at, which was a Dow facility. So even access to that actual location where this happened may be difficult for us. And certainly after an event like this, maybe even more difficult. But we're circling the area right on 332 right now, where 288 and 332 come together. If you're familiar with this area, like you're heading again to Surfside Beach.
All right, Jason Miles on the scene for us. Thank you so much for that report. We'll check back in with you, and I know you'll have a full report about what happened and how it ended coming up on our later newscast. We appreciate your time.
Yeah. So if you're just tuning in, here's what happened at this morning around 9:01. We got a report that there was a chlorine leak at the Olin plant in Freeport, and then around 9:30 we got the word of a shelter in place in Freeport, Lake Jackson, and Clute. And then around 9:46 we got a report that the leak had been stopped, but that the shelter in place remained in effect. And we just got off the phone a few minutes ago with the sheriff there, Bo Stallman in Brazoria County, who said that the shelter in place has been lifted for everybody involved, and as far as he knows, no one was injured, which is fabulous news.
It's really good news. And yeah, and just wanted to recap, Dr. Johnny, pulmonologist who we spoke to earlier, he did mention a couple of tips if you've been possibly exposed, right? And so some other ones that we got from him, he mentioned to wash your hair, face and hands, and then also wash the rest of your body. Use lots of lukewarm water and mild soap for several minutes. Also, he says finish with your plain water rinse. Try not to let the water run into your eyes, nose, or mouth. Do not scrub. And if your eyes are burning or you can't see normally, wash your eyes for 10 to 15 minutes in lukewarm water. And also do not use eye drops. So that's just a reminder there for folks who possibly could be exposed. But if you are breathing hard, if you are coughing hard, get to the hospital right away to get checked out. This is the time to do it, especially since the shelter in places have been lifted.
Yeah, it's very important to recap that because folks who already have pre-existing conditions and are dealing with upper respiratory issues, emphysema, if you're an active smoker, you could be experiencing these sort of symptoms much more quickly than other people. And as Dr. Johnny was telling us earlier, I asked if there was a healthy person within that shelter-in-place parameter, how long would it take them before they start experiencing symptoms? And he said it's hard to say because it depends on your proximity to the area where the leak occurred. So you just have to judge yourself and go to the ER, especially if you're a person with who's most at risk for something like that.
Another live picture from the Texas Medical Center of Lifelight leaving Memorial Hermann Hospital. We don't know where it's going, but of course we're keeping close tabs on everything. It arrived 10 minutes ago from the plant in Freeport, but we don't know if it brought anybody who was injured. And as far as the sheriff is concerned, nobody has been injured, at least off-site. So again, the sheriff saying that the shelter in place has been lifted, and we've got more confirmation. If you want more confirmation coming from CARE, which is the acronym for Community Awareness and Emergency Response, they're telling us that the chemical release in the Olin Plant B has been stopped. The precautionary community shelter in place is lifted in all areas. The safety of our employees, the community, and our environment is always our top priority. So another confirmation that the shelter in place has been lifted.
Yeah, you mentioned you talked to, of course, the sheriff spoke on our program earlier, but he also mentioned that they did conduct tests, Olin Refinery tests for the air quality, which is also how they were able to lift the shelter in place to give the all clear, essentially. We are still working to hear from the Olin Refinery site there to get more information about if any employees have been injured on site. Hopefully that's not the case, but that's something else we're working to learn more about.
And when we spoke with Jason Miles, he said he doesn't see any sort of panic, any extra emergency crews who have arrived at the plant as far as where he's located. So that could possibly be some good news. And the sheriff also said, as you just mentioned, Ugochi, they do on-plant testing to speak with officials about when to lift a shelter in place, but oftentimes we find out later in the day that the American Chemistry Council, they will come back and they will do additional testing and just see what happened, how much of a certain chemical or gas was actually released in the air and how much it takes to issue a shelter in place. But Jason Miles also used the word precautionary, which is very good news when we're talking about shelter in place. So it sounds like that's why they issued this one in the first place.
That obviously a huge investigation has to be conducted now, and the plant has to do whatever it can to make sure this doesn't happen again, get to the cause of the leak that we still don't know anything about. Of course, we're hoping that the company will give us some kind of a spokesperson today that we can interview. They often have a news conference after the dust settles, so to speak, to speak to the media about what happened and what they intend to do about it. And of course, we'll be staying in touch with law enforcement down there as well.
Yeah, and of course, our reporters speaking to residents out there and really figuring out how they feel. Symptoms potentially could come up later, which is something we'll be watching as well.
Yes, because if people develop symptoms, that's a great point, Ugochi, because you want to hold somebody accountable. Hopefully we're not dealing with that. And I never want to say just a leak, because we've dealt with our fair share of chemical explosions here in the Houston area, but we never want to say just a leak because that is a very harmful chemical, chlorine, to be released, and it can be very irritating for folks.
Yes, in any form. If you've got a pool, and so many people we know have pools, and the dangers of working with chlorine, just keeping your pool clean.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of people dying that way.
It's very sad. It's true though.
No, I think it's important to keep in mind to Sheriff Stallman. He did say that they were able to contain this leak from his experience pretty quickly, about 45 minutes. So for him, he was saying that's a quick time, a quick response to contain it, but still, that doesn't mean that people weren't exposed in that short amount of time. So that's something they have to watch out for. Again, those symptoms, right? If you're breathing hard, coughing, eyes start to burn, different things of that nature. Definitely want to get that checked now that the shelter in places have all been lifted. Now is the time to do it. If you feel anything wrong, don't wait.
45 minutes, a short period, relatively speaking, but it can be 45 minutes too long.
Exactly.
Depending on the person.
Yes. Well, we have our Troy Kless, who is on scene in Lake Jackson. He'll be speaking with residents and seeing if anyone smelled anything, what the scene was like there. And our Jason Miles, who we just spoke with a few minutes ago, is in Freeport near the plant. So he will also have a report coming up in our later newscast throughout the day.
Speaking of Jason, he did say it would be difficult to get to the part of the plant where the leak actually happened. Speaking to residents and people who work there, they say it's kind of hard. yard. So I guess he's going to have to get as close as he can to get information from the
road
plant.
might be blocked off as well.
That too.
You know.
Yeah.
But of course, we'll be searching for answers throughout the afternoon. If you're just tuning in, the chemical leak has been stopped, and the shelter in place in the Freeport area, affecting Freeport, Clute, and Lake Jackson, has been lifted. As far as we know, no injuries, but it's still early in the day.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us here for special coverage. For myself, Stephanie Simmons, Ron Trevino, and Ugochi Iloka, we appreciate you watching, and we will have the latest information about this leak on KHOU 11 Plus, also coming up on KHOU 11 News at noon.